Hello, friends. Welcome to section 2 of chapter 16, the Civil War. This section I'm going to divide into two parts. It's a little bit longer, so we're only going to do half of the section today and half of the section tomorrow. Okay, so we're going to be talking about some early battles in the Civil War. The very first battle that we're going to talk about is called the First Battle of Bull Run. This is the first major battle of the Civil War, and I'll give you one guess as to why it's called the First Battle of Bull Run. If you said out loud, there's going to be a second Battle of Bull Run, you would be correct. So this is only the first one. It was fought in northern Virginia near a river called Bull Run. Um, it was also fought near a town called Manassas Junction. So in some books, you might read that it's called the Battle of Manassas. Occasionally, they will call it by the name of the town that it was near. But for our purposes, we are going to be calling it the First Battle of Bull Run. Spoiler alert, the Confederates are going to win the very first battle. The Confederate forces were led by General P.G.T. Beauregard. So, just a word about leaders and generals. You will be responsible on your test for Chapter 16 to know who fought for what side. And so, if you want to start a running list, you can do that, and you can add Beauregard to the Confederate side. So, just a little FYI. All right, so let's talk about the battle. So, I know it sounds strange, but the North really thought that it was going to be an easy win for them. They didn't think that the Confederate Army would have a chance against the Union soldiers. And so, literally, on a Sunday, Bull Run is very close to D.C., it's not far. You had people dress up and take a picnic lunch to a hill overlooking the river where this battle was going to take place. They just thought it'd be a nice afternoon to see those rebels go down against the Union forces. And so it's not going to quite work out the way they thought, but at first, the Union Army was successful. They were pushing them back, but then the rebels, or the Confederates, rallied under General Thomas Stonewall Jackson, a very famous Confederate general. He was said to be standing in the middle of the battle, trying to hold the line for the Confederates, and someone said that he saw Stonewall Jackson holding down the attack like a stone wall, and that's where his nickname came from. So when the Confederates win this battle, it's going to shock the North. And so at first, the Union Army starts to retreat kind of in an orderly fashion, but then they break out into a panic run because the Confederates did this really strange thing called the rebel yell. They would literally yell at the top of their lungs, but imagine tens of thousands of people doing that. And so they literally start to panic and they start running and they start to overtake the people that had come out. And so you had soldiers and civilians all mixed up trying to run back away from the Confederate Army. So when the Northerners lose this fight, they realize that the war is going to be long, it's going to be hard, and it's going to cost them a lot, not only financially, but in people as well. And so Abraham Lincoln goes ahead and he signs two bills requesting a total of 1 million Army volunteers to serve for 3 years. And then he replaces Irvin McDowell, who was the original general there for the First Battle of Bull Run. He replaces him with General George McClellan to head the Union Army of the East. It's also called the Army of the Potomac, which is the river that runs through D.C. And so what you're going to see is the generals that oversee the Army of the East or the Army of the Potomac. It's going to be a revolving door of generals. Lincoln will have a hard time getting one person to have success. And so we'll talk about that throughout, but that's specifically for the Army of the East. All right, so let's talk about war at sea because, one of the advantages of the North was they had a very strong navy. And so they used that navy to blockade southern ports to prevent the South from exporting its cotton and from importing necessary supplies such as guns, ammunition, and food. And, cotton was the main source of income, so the North figured that they could really hold back the South if they could keep them from selling their cotton. Now, they didn't have enough boats right away to close off all their ports, but they did reduce trade by 2/3, which is significant. Over time, the North does build more ships to better enforce their blockades, which is very important. Now, the South did have some boats that could kind of sail in and out of ports because they were fast. They were called blockade runners, and it helped them get that 1/3 of cotton trade in and out. So I want to talk about one particular battle at sea because it really changes naval warfare forever. Um, and this is a battle between the North's ship called the Monitor and the South's ship called the Merrimack. Now, they're going to rename the Merrimack the Virginia, but for our purposes here, we're just going to call it the Monitor and the Merrimack. Now, the Virginia was an old northern ship that had been taken and restored by the South. It was probably broken down in a shipyard somewhere in Virginia that the South then called their own. And so when they restored this ship, they did something to it that made it so that it couldn't be beaten by a regular wooden warship. Now, what they did was they covered the ship in iron plates. Now, I'm going to show you a picture of the Merrimack and a picture of the North's Monitor. So you see, top right corner is the Merrimack. That's the South's ship. And then you have the Monitor bottom left. Now, when the North realized that the South had created a boat that could not be beaten by regular wooden ships, they had to try and catch up. And they did so. They had someone, a very smart engineer from Germany, actually. I think it's from Germany. He might have been from like Sweden. I'm not 100% sure, but he definitely was an American. He comes over and he helps the North build their ironclad ship called the Monitor. So both ships were basically covered in iron plates. That's why they were called ironclad. They were very difficult to sink. You could see, too, that the Monitor, the North ship, sank so low in the water, it almost looks like a submarine, right? This is like a precursor to submarines. But either way, so you have the Merrimack actually destroying a couple of Northern Navy ships early on, and then it has this showdown with the Monitor. So you have an ironclad versus an ironclad, the only two boats of their kind in the world. And they basically fight for like 3 hours, and the cannonballs are bouncing off their hulls. And in the end, the Union's Monitor is the victor because the Merrimack never threatened Northern ships again. It was so badly damaged that they never could ever repair it. But this changes naval warfare forever. This is a moment in time where after this, like literally this one battle made all wooden boats obsolete for the rest of time. So if you're as far as a military history buff, this was a big moment in military history, especially naval warfare. So we're going to end it right here, and tomorrow we'll pick up with the second half of chapter 16, section 2. And I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.